Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into real cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Have you or someone you love been a victim of a crime that's still unsolved? Crime Curious has teamed up with one of the top private investigation services in the Indiana and surrounding area. If you have listened to us long enough, you know that we do not seek out services or products that are meaningless to us or hold no real value. So you can trust us when we say that Corbett Investigations comes with decades of experience you won't find anyplace else. Corbett Investigations is run by a former homicide commander of one of the country's most successful homicide units, has put over 400 people in prison for homicide, handled over 1,100 death investigations, and solved 33 cold case murders. To be real with you, Mr. Corbett had a really difficult time telling us what we should highlight in this segment because he does not like to sound like he's bragging. Solving crimes has been his life's passion, and he has never done it for the accolades or recognition. He has a whole team behind his services that help him be so successful, as they specialize in things like blood stain analysis, ballistics, crime scene reconstruction, and forensic pathology, just to name a few. When you contact Corbett Investigations, you talk directly with Tim Corbett. He is hands-on with every case and can travel anywhere that's needed to get the job done. Corbett Investigations prides itself on honesty, truth, feet to the ground, real investigation work, and the strength to stand up to whatever is in the way of solving the crime. Corbett Investigations specializes in complex homicide cases, sex offenses, and criminal investigations that are old and new. Tim and his team have a reputation for finding witnesses and information that others could not. Although we hope none of our listeners ever need private investigation services, if you do, we recommend contacting Corbett Investigations and mention this segment on Crime Curious for a free consultation. Contact Tim Corbett today at 574-229-8115. You can also check them out on Facebook at Corbett Investigative Services, Inc., or their email, tim@tcorbett.org. That's tim@tcorbett.org. Thanks for listening, and now on to the show. Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
I'm Megan.
Let's shake all of our gree-gree. I've got bones. You've got crystals.
Dormouse.
We are getting...
Positivity.
We're off to a good start here.
Happy Monday.
My friend, we should just preface this episode with it is after work on a Monday. You know what? Just for that, let's shake the gree-gree again.
She dropped them. Oh, my God. They escaped. I watched it happen.
Why?
They jumped. We have jumpers. Because it's Monday. They can feel it, too.
Apparently, I shooketh a little too hardeth.
Good God, woman.
Okay. Well, sometimes. It's Monday. So, anyway, I'm bringing us a German case.
I can't wait to hear you pronounce these.
It'll be so much fun. There will be so many great reviews about how awful I am at pronouncing all the German case. Yes.
Yeah.
Nay. Yeah.
No. She says, no, I do not. Okay.
All right.
9.
This case is commonly known as the Call Girls murders.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to thank Jonathan for the recommendation here.
Thank you.
Jonathan actually just recommended the main Call Girl case, it's not even a hard word. It's not even a German word. That's just me being me.
Is it
stumbling
Rose?
over it? Rosemarie.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, nothing hard whatsoever about that. That was just run-of-the-mill Charnell for you.
Sometimes I stumble over normal words when I'm speaking as well. It just happens. My brain thinks faster than my tongue.
Oh, see?
It does.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to let that low-hanging fruit
Oh.
stay there.
I didn't think you were going to, but I do appreciate your huge smile as you attempt to move on.
I'm going to segue away from that and into, Jonathan had recommended Rosemarie Nitribitt is her last name. But I found another one that was very similar as well. So I put them together because it's very interesting how this plays out, that there might be a connection. I don't know. We'll see. So let's talk a little bit first about Rosemarie.
Okay.
She was born in 1933 as Maria Rosalia Nitribitt. She was known to everyone as Rosemarie, though. She had grown up in North Rhine-Westphalia and was raised along with her two younger half-sisters. Now, they were raised in poor societal circumstances. They kind of bounced between Ratingen and Dusseldorf. And by 1938, Rosemarie and her half-sister, Irmgard, were placed in a juvenile home in Eschweiler. And after 1939, they were taken in, both of them together, by foster parents Nicholas and Anna Maria Elson.
So were they in a juvenile facility because their parents couldn't take care of them?
Correct.
So they hadn't done anything wrong.
Mm-mm.
It was
No,
kind of
it
like
was
our
the poverty.
neglect and abuse, but it wasn't probably even neglectful. It was probably, we can't afford to feed you and provide you with a home. And unfortunately, that's what happened in the 30s and 40s.
It did, yes. And so they
Kids in orphanages.
voluntarily just placed their daughters, their two oldest daughters, into this juvenile home,
It's
orphanage.
so sad.
It is.
Now, we can't feed these mouths, and so you're off on your own at 13.
And so the state will,
Yeah.
the country, whatever, will feed the mouths instead. And not only that, but war is on the horizon. Okay, this is 1939. And the Elson family fell into financial difficulties, as many families found themselves at this time. And unfortunately, this gets even more traumatic for Rosemarie because at the age of 11, she was repeatedly raped by a neighborhood boy.
Like while she was at home still, before she went to the orphanage?
No, when
or
she is
after?
in the foster, remember the foster parents, Nicholas and
Yes.
Anna Maria Elson, they take her and her sister in from the juvenile home. So this happened at that residence.
Location.
Mhm.
Right.
And this incident was swiftly covered up. They lived in a very small village of Eiffel. And so that in itself took a devastating toll for Rosemarie. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course it's going to.
Early childhood trauma.
Yes, she's 11. Now think about the fact that she was placed in a juvenile home, then is living with foster parents, then has that sexual abuse trauma. And just life in general is real freaking hard for families. Everyone is not doing real great. Okay, so all
We
of that
weren't
is
real
going on.
supportive of young female victims of CSC at that time either. Hence
Absolutely
the cover
not.
up,
The
right?
cover up. Yep.
Probably got a lot of, oh, it's the neighbor boy. Oh, he's a good kid. Oh, he wouldn't have done that.
She
or
was
even if he was
seducing him.
right, this girl who's from the streets, we take her in and then she does bad things.
Of course. It's her fault. She went from being described as being a really lively and bright young girl to by the age of 13, she was being described as being reclusive and isolated. Now, with her family's poor financial state and in a state of desperation, she actually began work as a sex worker. Not uncommon. She's 13 at this point in time. It was a popular way to make ends meet. Now, I couldn't find information that her family was doing this and pimping her out, essentially. Okay. What I was reading into was that she chose to do this to provide for herself. And there are Allied troops that are stationed in like post-war Germany and in army of occupation, things like that. They are easy targets for her to make money.
And she's an easy target.
Absolutely.
One, we're talking about the oldest career that women have in history, right?
Yep.
They have their bodies.
Yep.
She's already been horribly traumatized.
Yes.
And we know that young girls that are victimized at that early lose a huge sense of self-worth and their sexuality after that is easy to disconnect. And for her to use that as a business and a means to exist.
Yeah.
Because she's been traumatized so much already.
Well, and let's not forget just the overall way of parenting life back then could be very traumatic as well. You know, physically harming children as a form of, quote, discipline was common practice, but all it did is add to trauma. We know that now, right?
We do.
So I can see how she would not have, where she would struggle with self-respect and being a woman, being taught that what you should value about yourself is your womanhood and your sexuality, because that is how you can make ends meet.
And now there's 18-year-old boys drafted into the military who are serving in a position they may not even want to. It's not like it was voluntary service at this point in time.
They might even be younger than 18.
You got it. Lied to get in, right? And then sex happens.
Yes. And she's 13.
That they have to pay for.
Right. But she's 13, doesn't look 13. She's gorgeous. So that all comes into play as well. She does get caught, however, and was later sent to many other juvenile correctional homes. Now, these are different than the juvenile home that she was sent to with her stepsister, or half-sister, excuse me, earlier in her life. These are correctional homes. Oh, you're selling yourself on the street, so
You're a criminal. Mm-hmm. You're going to juvie.
Exactly. Now, she would escape frequently.
Shocking.
From the juvenile
they don't keep a good
homes.
eye on you there?
No, guess not. And she eventually moves to Frankfurt, and there she will work briefly as a waitress and a model. I told you that she was very good looking.
Okay.
She had those model looks. However, she still is dabbling in sex work, and she was arrested in Frankfurt railway station in 1951, where she was charged with
vagrancy. That was how they basically, it's kind of like loitering, but with ill purposes.
Okay.
Their version of she was prostituting herself or up to some type of criminal mischief of the young woman variety.
Couldn't help but notice it has the word vag in it. Yes, like, of course, we're going to
has the word vag in it. It is VAG to start. Some states
doesn't surprise me.
Some states still have something similar on the books, but
in the
it's
United
not,
States.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily anything regarding prostitution. It's more like, it's awful, but it's more like being homeless, being a beggar, and being in one spot. And then perhaps...
I mean, I have heard the term vagrant before.
Annoying the neighbors.
Okay.
You know? Your kind isn't welcome here.
Well, she only got 3 weeks imprisonment for this.
Well, I would hope,
crime.
because it's really not that egregious.
No. She was released, and she did continue her career as a sex worker. Okay. And she would voluntarily attend monthly police health checkups in order to avoid having to carry a prostitution card. Because the 50s man in Germany.
Okay.
This is 1951.
They're like, if you engage in sex work, you have to carry a card that indicates that is your profession.
How much do you want to bet that they charged them for the card? Probably. So they're like, this is how the country can profit off from the oldest profession there is.
Government pimping.
Yes. You want to do that? You must have a professional license to do so, ma'am.
Interesting.
With your own body.
Don't get any ideas, United States. This is not something that we're going to advocate for.
No kidding. Now, she started, because of her gorgeous good looks, and she was charming, okay? She started having very wealthy patrons and clients that would lavish her with gifts, even to the point where she could start affording vacations to the Mediterranean.
Damn.
Okay, she's doing well for herself.
I guess.
And she would just keep doing her monthly health checkups with the police saying, okay, nope, I don't have the gonorrhea. I don't have the lice.
I don't have the syphilis.
Nope, I am STD free, so I can continue to do what I want to do. Yeah.
Intriguing.
She drove a really nice vehicle. As we're talking like she is saving up her money. She's really an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Of the entrevagin.
You've just explained, though, something I didn't know about Germany during that time, and that is that prostitution was legal.
If you had a card or you followed the rules.
Mm-hmm.
You would, or she would, not you would, her.
You don't know what I would do. You might have a good guess,
Actually,
though.
I think you would do this.
Fine.
She liked to routinely drive down Kaiserstraße, that's a popular street, and passed the Frankfurter Hof, one of Germany's most luxurious and expensive hotels. And when she spotted a well-dressed gentleman, she would stop the car, roll down the windows, play loud music in an attempt to get his attention. And so that's how she started.
I don't need the loud music.
Your mouth will do just fine.
Hey, what you doing later?
She became much more in demand. So that is how she actually started to get the more lavish clients. Okay. And of course, men talk, right? They kiss and tell.
Oh, yeah.
So she became much more in demand. And so she began arranging meetups over the phone, and she would only entertain those who knew her password. And her password was Rebecca.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm here to speak with Rebecca. I was talking to Ralph from the club, and he said Rebecca might be somebody I'd be interested in taking to dinner.
Yes. I like the idea of a speak-easy way into sex work.
Well, she was doing it.
Only the right clients that you're looking to entertain.
Well, I think that they exist here, and they're called like high-class escorts.
Right.
It's not legal, but they do it.
They do.
Again, women and men
I know.
engage in this type of employment currently.
Boy,
as well.
was I dumb.
Not legal employment.
Was I dumb in my 20s or what?
I suppose.
Why
No.
did I not think of just being
You would have been
date?
reported for failing to pay income tax on it and been in jail for tax fraud because you would have made so much money the IRS would have come after
Yeah,
you
I'm sure.
because you didn't pay the poussé tax. We all know it.
We do. Up to the period of her death, she entertained many wealthy clients, some of whom were influential and powerful with influential political connections. On the evening of October 29th, 1957, Rosemarie had visited her apartment by Heinz Pullman, a businessman and a friend of Rosemarie. Good old Heinz, Mr. Pullman. He was the last person to see her alive.
Well, Mr. Pullman, that is sketch. You are going to be on someone's list.
Oh, he gets on a list. 3 days later, on November 1st, the police were alerted by Rosemarie's house cleaner, who had been unable to gain entry into her apartment, and she knew that was very odd because by now 3 days have gone by, and she gonna need those bed sheets cleaned.
Yeah. I never want to be. We've said it before, but the housekeeper has the worst job in the world.
Sure do.
They find more dead bodies than anybody else.
I bet they do.
You open the door and that smell. Oh, that poor housekeeper doesn't get paid enough. No wonder women would go into sex work instead. I'm going to tell you that it's illegal, but some days I would way rather spread my legs than have to vacuum.
House cleaning is awful.
It is.
It is. And I can't say as though I've actually said that about the other thing.
Right. I mean,
I'm sure it could be.
We won't get into that.
Right.
We've all had our moments.
All right. Good point. Fair point. I was forgetting about
that one time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's okay.
Inside, of course, they discover poor Rosemarie. She has perished.
I assumed.
She was sprawled out on the floor with her legs actually positioned on a reclining chair. So she's on the floor, but her legs are on the chair. And which is odd.
I don't like it.
It's a very odd situation. But she had, I hated this detail. I'm sorry, you guys. Her miniature white poodle, Joe, was whimpering next to her lifeless body.
Dogs do that.
They do.
Or they eat you. I'm glad Joe was
They
whimpering.
found her in time so that Joe survived. The dog is fine. Okay? It's always harder for us when the dog goes too.
Murders, or how about suspicious death, since we don't know yet, although you're about to tell us, like that bother me when there's clearly been a post-mortem posing.
Yeah.
No one died in that position with their legs up on the chair unless she naturally had a heart attack while she was doing some crunches.
Well, I'm going to say that she probably wasn't doing that because one of her nylon stockings was found tightly around her neck, and it appeared that she had suffered a head wound.
Yeah, I assume exactly what happened there.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. She had her body did show other signs of
Trauma?
Yeah, bruising, things like that. Not even just the nylon strangulation. There were even like potential hands before the nylon happened. So it was a fight.
A violent death.
It was a violent, yes.
And I would be shocked if you told me that her death was caused by anything other than the actual strangulation asphyxiation. There might have been other blunt force trauma, but...
No, I mean, really, for the cause of death, truly it was one or the other. They don't actually know. It was listed as both, as potentially that head wound that she had, or the strangulation.
Yeah.
The only thing from the home, though, that they could find that was missing was 18,000 marks.
Well, somebody took her money.
Yep. But other than that, the home was not ransacked, with the exception of some signs of the struggle in the room that this took place in. But she had all kinds of really high value things. She was a woman who has been gifted things by her misters.
She's going to have jewelry and
loaded.
Furs and possibly artwork and expensive tchotchkes all around.
And it was all untouched. They specifically mention how weird it was that like the fur coats in the jewelry were untouched. It was only, from what they could tell, 18,000 marks had been stolen.
And I always wonder how the hell they know the exact amount.
There had been some sort of that's what they know. It could have been more, but there had been a withdrawal, so they knew she would have had that cash that on her, and it was nowhere to be found. So that's just the deductive reasoning of where that came from. There could have been more money around the home that was found, but there wasn't any. It was very careful. There was no ransacking. If they found other monies, it was done in a clean way and taken in a clean way. The problem is, though, the police right from the start just don't take this very seriously, because they just look at her as a lady of the night.
Yeah, when you're a sex worker, you get what's coming to you, right? It's
Truly.
been almost every sex worker case we've ever covered.
Yep, and here we are. This is no different, because there was sloppy police work. They did not really secure vital pieces of evidence, and the crime scene was contaminated because in the early stages of just finding her, they're trampling all over the place. They're not taking fingerprints. They're not doing the regular investigatory work. And so they're destroying evidence just as fast as they're walking around trying to find any.
Which causes you concern when there's one person who she was last known to be seen with who's clearly a suspect. But what about all of the other potential customers or friends that were in the home that could have left fingerprints or other signs of DNA?
Later in the case, though, the police files even go missing because they're just not that invested.
The police files go missing?
Sure. Did they go missing, and was the police work sloppy because they're not that invested? Or is it possibly because, remember how I told you that she had a very high profile clientele?
Yeah.
Even political connections.
Yep. I just keep thinking now of somebody being like, ooh, this is going to disappear from this pile, and this person would be interested.
There's my underwear. Yoink.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. As a result, Rosemarie Nitribitt, was buried in North Cemetery in Dusseldorf during a very hasty ceremony that was attended by very few besides police and reporters. Her mother, Maria Hoffman, and her half-sister, Irmgard, were in attendance, but weirdly, it was noted by the police that neither one of them shed a tear. Because remember, they're looking like they want to see who's going to show up to this funeral for suspects.
I think hardened German women of that time, who clearly didn't have easy lives, it would be fair to say that you could sit there and not be emotional.
I agree.
I don't think that's a sign of anything.
No, they've seen some shit.
They've seen some shit, right? Thank you.
Yeah. So,
but it doesn't mean that they're not
to say
suspects.
This, or sad. I mean, that's really not to say that they couldn't have been sad about it. They just weren't outwardly showing it. So the police investigation naturally focuses on her line of work and who her many acquaintances, as all potential suspects, right? There were several prominent figures, including Playboy Gunter Sachs and Rosemarie's close friend and benefactor, Harold von Bohlen-Ochbach, and brother, Alfred Krupp von Bohlen-Ochbach. Yes.
That's her brother?
Yes. No, that is...
Oh, the guy's brother.
That's Harold's brother. Harold and Alfred.
All right.
But their last name literally is von Bohlen-Ochbach and Holbach.
I could see this being a German movie. Like, I want to watch this
there is movies on it. It's
really?
It's not accurate, but yes,
they
there was
sensationalized it.
books and movies, yeah. Much older now. I don't even know that we could get our hands on them. I just saw that they were made reference to, but anyway.
We need a translator.
For sure, yes, because I could barely get through Alfred and Harold's last names here. But anyway, these brothers are the head of the Krupp Company. And it had been rumored that there was a photograph found in her apartment of a man so famous that his identity was never revealed for the problems that it would cause.
A German man?
Mm-hmm. Investigators.
Maybe a political or a military one?
Very possible.
Oh, you know what I have going through my head right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, investigators discreetly questioned many of her clients, including 2 U.S. Army officers and other enlisted men. This resulted in the U.S. Army promptly reminding their servicemen that anyone caught having sexual relations with German sex workers would result in them being court-martialed and sent home. According to those questioned, Rosemarie had asked all of them for $250 for an abortion.
Oh.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the German press begins to theorize about the motives that her killer might have had, speculating either jealousy, greed, or lust. The latter was soon ruled out when it was determined that Rosemarie had not been raped prior to her death, meaning the crime was not sexually motivated.
Still could have been a crime of passion, though.
She could have.
Somebody didn't want her to have their baby, or somebody didn't want her to have someone else's baby because they thought they were in love with her.
But you know what I couldn't find? I couldn't find that the autopsy revealed that she was pregnant.
Right. And she may not have been. Maybe she was committing extortion and just trying to get money. But do you find it strange?
Yes.
$250 she's asking for from everybody, and she was clearly found with, I don't know what the equivalent of 19,000 marks
mm-hmm.
was. Maybe I should look it up.
Well, and I'm going to say this too about the autopsy. It is very possible that it wasn't a thorough one, and perhaps they never ventured down there.
Would they have cared to check to see if a prostitute, as they call them, a sex worker, a call girl, a woman of the night, was even expecting?
Yeah, exactly. Very possible that they wouldn't have. The theft really seemed to indicate that money was either the primary motive or staged to appear like a robbery gone awry, which that's an interesting thought too. Just that 18,000 marks is gone or whatever, but nothing else is. So maybe that was just a staging. So soon the press began to tarnish the memory of Rosemarie, and many rumors began to circulate. There were whispers that she had kept a tape recorder, which she used to record secrets that she had obtained from her many clients to use in case she needed to blackmail them. Those were all just rumors, though.
Yeah, but highly possible. I mean, if she has a high clientele, we have a file just come up missing and disappear. It could have easily been somebody, high profile.
There could have been tapes that were made that disappeared as well. Mm-hmm.
So when they say marks, they actually mean the Deutschmark, which used to be the Germany currency, a currency of West Germany from 1948 until 1990, until they also adopted the euro.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would translate from 1951.
It was one of the world's most
too.
stable currencies at the time, though.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
All right, carry on.
So here we have rumors of all these different types of things that she may have had in her possession in case she wanted to blackmail her clients. All right. Well, this started to lead to paranoia, essentially. And one of her, I had mentioned to you earlier that she had some high profile clientele by the last name of Sack. Okay. His own father, Willie, had been driven to suicide in November 1958 due to depression and fear of blackmail.
Did you just say Willie Sack?
I did. His name is Willie.
Just wondered.
Sack. Yeah. Maybe it's not pronounced Sack, but it is.
Oh, no, it is for me.
It sure is. I couldn't let it rest there either. It has to be Sack. And so there was never any indication that there was necessarily a connection between Willie and Rosemarie, but there was with his son and Rosemarie. Investigators searched her apartment again, but never found any evidence that anything had been recorded or that that she had even owned a tape recorder. None of the people that they interviewed ever mentioned seeing a tape recorder, anything like that. So that's very interesting that there's so much rumor and paranoia abound that a man actually took his own life, even though they couldn't really find a connection. But obviously there had been one. They questioned 40 to 60 clients. None of them made mention of a tape recorder or of blackmail. But one investigator who worked the case commented that Rosemarie did not possess the intelligence to blackmail clients of a higher mental caliber.
I don't buy that.
There were several suspects in the case. However, most of them were quickly ruled out. Now, the prime suspect is 37-year-old businessman Heinz Pullman, a close personal friend of Rosemarie, who was the last person to see her alive, and he became even more suspicious when he started bragging about the town that he was the only person in Frankfurt who had a key to Rosemarie's apartment. When her body was discovered, one detail that they didn't tell people, the apartment door had been locked from the outside, leading people to believe that the killer had a key. And if he is going around saying he's the only person in possession of a key to her place...
Do you believe that, though?
No. But Pullman was soon arrested. And a witness actually came forward and told police that Pullman had almost run him over late in the afternoon of October 29th, which was the time speculated to be of her murder. This witness told investigators that Pullman had sped past the courtyard behind Striftstrabe 36, it's a road, the apartment block where Rosemarie lived, and almost knocked him over. And it was revealed that prior to the murder, Pullman had experienced financial difficulties, but following Rosemarie's death, he was able to settle his debts and even purchased a new automobile.
So people speculate that he stole her money and that it was financially motivated.
Correct.
Because I was just going to ask you what potential motive he had, since clearly him being her fan club was one of the things he enjoyed. Oh, I know her. Oh, I have a key. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're that close.
Yes.
Like, why would you kill that person?
I'm a personal friend to her. He denied any involvement, of course, in the slaying of Rosemarie and explained that their relationship had been completely platonic because he was homosexual.
And unfortunately, that lends credence to the way that she was found, not sexually violated.
I know.
And robbed of not anything but the money. Didn't take anything else from her, although he would have known where her other stuff was if he wanted to, and maybe he did. Maybe he could have strategically taken things that no one would have noticed were missing because he had access.
But maybe being a close personal friend of hers, he actually was able to get those things bequeathed to him.
And I was thinking,
in her death.
So there would have been some type of a record in terms of there being a will if she left things to him. But if she was that close to him, who's to say she wouldn't have just given him the money?
Well, right. I know.
Who's to say she wouldn't have just bailed him out of trouble because he was her buddy?
Well, he's been trying to tell the police that Rosemarie had been murdered by a woman. He felt that the murder was a jealous woman.
Also explains the fact that it wasn't client, at least that we're aware of, that was sexually interested in her.
But during his investigation, he made conflicting statements and claimed the money that he had recently received was from thefts and embezzlements and not from how the police suspected stealing it from Rosemarie.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I love when people do this. He's like, so I didn't kill her. I committed other crimes.
I did.
To get this money.
It wasn't murder, but it was other crimes.
I committed embezzlement, larceny, I didn't invade anybody's home and kill them, though.
Nope.
Not my friend, at least.
And he insisted that he had a key to Rosemarie's apartment. And if he wanted to, he could have easily entered it when she wasn't home and steal the money while she wasn't home. There was no reason to break in while she was there and murder her to steal the money. Since he had a key, he could have done it at any time. I do understand that argument. There were a gray pair of trousers owned by Mr. Pullman, and they did seem to be stained with a reddish substance. He claims this was rust. However, when a serologist from the Federal Criminal Office countered that the stain was in fact human blood, Pullman then responded with, maybe it is blood. I suffer from a skin disease which makes me bleed from time to time. When the police made plans to charge him for murder, Pullman soon became aware that he was the prime suspect, and he threatened to release the names of Rosemarie's high-profile and well-known clients. Well, despite that, he was eventually charged with murder, and they went through with the trial in 1960, but he was acquitted.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The prosecution...
Well, there's not enough evidence then, or at least there wasn't for how their court
Correct.
system works.
The prosecution had failed to produce sufficient evidence pointing to his guilt. They had been unable to link the blood that was found on Pullman's trousers to Rosemarie, which, along with the fact that there was nothing that they could conclusively connect him to the murder, ultimately led to the collapse of the case against him. A free man again, Pullman was able to land a leading role in a film being made about Rosemarie. However, due to the negative attention, he was dropped by the producers.
Yeah, I can't imagine that would go over well.
Mm-hmm. No, but this man continued to try to capitalize on his association with a notorious unsolved murder of a sex worker.
His friend, the sex worker.
Right.
Who he portrayed to be his friend, her friend.
He contacted the Soviet and East German authorities and offered to sell the list of Rosemarie's clients, claiming he knew them all by memory.
Did you really?
However, the Soviet authorities refused his offer.
I'm glad.
He then wrote articles in which he would describe his nights of lust with Frankfurt's most expensive escort, which were published in Quick magazine, okay? These two were eventually dropped after sweeping protests from the readers because he was basically making her, in her death, famous for being the most expensive escort, and he would
tag along,
yes,
clean her underwear.
Well, and talk about her
clients.
Dealings with her clients. Yes, as if he was there or knew anything about them, or this is just gossip that they would share between the two of them, right? In the years since her death, Rosemarie had become somewhat of a heroine, capturing the hearts of investigators and the public alike. Her glamorous face adorned newspapers and magazines, and her life and the events surrounding her death were so sensational that many people named their horses, boats, and even children after her.
Rosemarie.
Although there have been some movies based on her life, there are mostly inaccurate depictions of it. And no one's ever really been found guilty. Not ever really. No one has ever been found guilty for her murder. The most popular theories, though, involve her high-profile clients who many suspect had thwarted the investigation in an effort to protect their identities and reputations, which that makes sense. Almost 2 years exactly to the day that Rosemarie was murdered, there was a similar murder that occurred in the Netherlands, and it's often been linked to the Frankfurt slaying of Rosemarie. On November 2nd in 1959, an acquaintance arrived at Nueva Haven to the home of Sybil Alida Johanna Nymans, a well-known high-class sex worker who was known as Blonde Dolly.
Oh, I dig it.
So her name's Sybil, so I might vacillate between Sybil and Dolly, just depending. But on that Monday of November 2nd, 1959, a friend was surprised to find, when they arrived at Blonde Dolly's house, that her curtains were still drawn, the front door was locked, and there was no reply to repeated knocks. And her well-beloved dog was howling from inside the apartment.
So many traumatized puppies.
I know.
Their mommies got
There's
killed.
so many similarities. All of which was unusual, of course, for Dolly, who was described by her acquaintances as being always punctual, on time for appointments. When another friend was contacted and also had the same experience recently with showing up and knocking on the door and the curtains drawn, dog howling, Dolly not answering, the two decided it was time to contact the police. When officers arrived, they used the neighbor's backyard to access the garden and break into the kitchen window to enter Dolly's house. But upon entering, they found the body of 32-year-old Dolly, Sybil Dolly, in quotes, in the upstairs main bedroom, which was not the room that she would use to entertain her clients. She was lying on the bed, dressed in a thin white camisole. The cause of death was not immediately apparent, but it was later ascertained that she had been strangled to death, most likely during the previous Friday night. Now, this was a Monday, okay?
Yeah, she's been in there all weekend.
Mm-hmm. And that was when she was last seen alive. So they're thinking either later Friday night or early Saturday morning, and again in her own home. Police began the murder investigation, and in an effort to understand the motive for her murder and uncover the identity of the potential killer, not only dove into the life of Blonde Dolly, hoping to find something, but they also kept a lot of details close to their chest on purpose. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Alida Niemans could be pronounced, was born in Amsterdam West on September 27th, 1927. During her childhood, she actually had a chronically ill mother who was also named Sybil, or her mom's name was Sibelia. So Sybil had several, she was Sybil, Alida, Niemans, yes. And so depending on when you met her in life, you either knew her as Alida, Blonde Dolly, or Sybil. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, but her mom was chronically ill, and she was admitted to the hospital where she later died when Sybil was really, really young. And so her and her older brother were sent by their father to the Groot's Children Home in Zandervoort.
All right.
So
good job, Charnell.
She also is in a children's home. We have those similarities between the two, Rosemarie and Blonde Dolly here. During World War II, the Germans occupied the area that Dolly and her brother were living at. So they were sent back to Amsterdam to live with their father and his new wife. Now, Sybil, Miss Blonde Dolly, she did not get along very well with her stepmom. So she soon left home to look for a job and accommodations despite being underage. And this, Megan, is no surprise where she first became involved in prostitution. When searching for a room, she met an Italian sailor who was also a pimp working in Kirkstrat. And after intervention by the police, she did return home to her father and stepmom, so she was caught prostituting and being pimped out by this Italian sailor, where she did start training as a seamstress.
All right, so she had a legitimate career. She was training toward.
Yep. Which is a dying art today.
Oh my God!
And I wish that more of us knew how to do it. Mm-hmm. By 1948, at the age of 21, Sybil Alida moved to Den Haag, where she rented a room and resumed working as an independent sex worker at this point in time.
Okay, so she didn't have anybody to report to. She wasn't being pimped out. She took her own clients when she wanted to and for what she wanted.
Right. At this time in her life, she was known as Dark Molly.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Because she had dark curls. But she later bleached it and then was known by the nickname of Blonde Dolly.
Been there, girl.
Dark Molly, Blonde Dolly. I mean, personality changes, certainly.
You never know what you're into. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was
I too have went from blonde to dark to blonde
quick
again.
Personality change. I've done the same.
Mm-hmm. In 1950, she bought a house at 498 Nieuwe Haven and met and married Botto van den Berg, a violinist in Haag's orchestra.
She liked herself a man of talent. She married a violinist.
She did, who was in a legitimate orchestra. So she quit her job as a call girl and she found work as a model, also like Rosemarie. And she was very good looking as well. And her husband, Vanderborg, there introduced her to classical music, and she often accompanied her husband when traveling with the orchestra. She also became interested in the arts and fashion. She would occasionally find work as a fashion model, and their union produced no children, but they did start experiencing marital problems. So after about a year of marriage, the marriage falls apart. They go through a very lengthy divorce, and they part ways in 1957. Soon after this, Sybil returns back to Blonde Dolly.
Well,
So
she had to
she's-
make ends meet.
Yep, she's back, but this time she's a high-class sex worker.
Well, she is now skilled in orchestra music
That's
and
right,
art
classical
and high
music,
fashion.
high
and
fashion. Mhm.
She is cultured herself and cannot take anybody lower or
Nope.
beneath her at this
Nope,
point.
and I get that. She has evolved. She got a promotion. Yeah.
She wanted to have a little good conversation with the something.
Yes. Not only that, but the wealthy patrons will give you lavish gifts
Oh, yeah.
and accommodations, right?
Yeah.
So
You're
she
going to take me to dinner. We're going to go
You're
dancing.
going to have a great time. It doesn't quite feel like work when you're enjoying yourself that way, at least.
It's a
At
true
least for the
story.
start of it. So she
It's
continues.
never felt like work to me when I'm having a nice time.
No, I agree. I rather enjoy having a nice time, to be honest with you.
I want the fancy dinner and the champagne.
I kind of require it now.
I mean,
I'm married.
really,
You got to work a
absolutely.
little harder for it now. So, anyway, she continues to see her wealthy clients only for the next 2 years until her untimely death. When Dolly dies, when they find her in that apartment, they quickly rule out robbery as a motive. Because Dolly's room had not been ransacked, there was no sign of violence, and in addition, her jewelry was all there. Her furs, a considerable sum of money was hidden under the floorboards, where they uncovered a stash of a lot. Plus, she had what was called golden 10 guilder coins, a popular investment during the time. And further investigation into her financial affairs discovered that Blonde Dolly not only owned the house that she lived at 498 Nuva Haven, but also several other properties.
She was a real estate
She
investor.
was an entrepreneur, some of which she rented out to other people. Her own personal wealth, which was quite considerable, was spread across several bank accounts and would be worth upwards of $4.4 million in present-day value.
Oh, shit. She was good at what she was doing.
I know. I can't say as though anyone has ever rated me $4.4 million worth, but
I can
all
assure
right.
you that's not in my current bank account.
Nope. I guess we could all learn something from Blonde Dolly.
Oh, well, we both took different career paths.
We did. None of her belongings or money had been stolen. Police came to the conclusion that the motive for the crime was not robbery. Upon further investigation into the shock of the police, it was found that Sybil had actually led somewhat of a double life. Although she was well known for her work as a sex worker, which she did 5 nights a week, she became involved in daytime activities that were very different. She worked with several different charities. She often held poetry readings in various hospitals and homes for the elderly across Den Haag, where she also shared her love of the arts and enjoyed reading the works of Dutch poets and Belgian poets.
That's amazing.
I
So she was
know.
definitely a cultured woman.
Another discovery by the investigators, and one that would shock the public, was that Dolly's little blue book that she had, which she kept all the names and contact information of her more exclusive clients. So she had a book. Rumors abounded that these individuals were from the highest strata of society, such as wealthy businessmen and local politicians. However, the little blue book was lost during the investigation.
Pocketed.
Sure was. Which many then started to speculate about a cover-up, much like in Rosemarie's.
Even if they weren't covering up the actual murder, somebody was saving themselves or someone they knew, like, some bitch, here's the blue book.
Yep.
We can't let this get out.
Yep.
Or they said, I'm going to hold on to this in case I need to make some money later.
Absolutely. I can make some calls and
Hell
I can
yeah, I
extort
can.
some money.
That's right.
Soon enough, the international press picked up the story, and it was soon linked to the Frankfurt murder of Rosemarie Nitribitt in 1957, in which there were also allegations of possible cover-up with politicians being involved. Police eventually focused on a prime suspect in the case, that of a bodyguard named Gerald V., who had been hired by Dolly as an extra precaution after Dolly heard about another sex worker named Blondie. Her name actually was Blonde Marguerite Vaness.
They just like to tell people what color hair you're getting into.
I think
at the
so.
beginning.
So they know what the curtains are and the drapes, I suppose.
Oh, good God. I knew you were going to go there with it.
Home decor? Sure.
Apparently, people have a specific interest in hair color at that time frame.
I guess.
In Europe.
I guess. So what happened, though, to Blonde Marguerite Vaness is that she had been robbed, and in some reports, it had said that she had been killed in early December 1958. And so at this point in time, Dolly decided to hire this bodyguard, Gerald V., because she was a little fearful that that could happen to her.
And a good idea in the line of work that you're in when you're raking in close to the equivalent of $4 million in worth.
Yep.
You can afford to hire some private security.
She had and Gerald had a criminal record, had apparently fallen in love with Dolly, according to some reports.
As one will.
And many said that he had developed an obsession for Dolly and began openly fantasizing about her, and even told his family that they were engaged, but she had rejected all of his advances. So this is why he is the prime suspect at first, okay?
Yeah, and it's creepy. She hired you for a job. She's not interested. Even if she does sex work, no means no.
Right.
Stop hitting on her.
One of the most damning...
Damning. I knew what you meant. That one wasn't German.
It was not. Ironically, I'm having problems with common English words today. One of the most damning pieces of evidence concerning Gerald V. was the fact that he incriminated himself early on in the investigation. When the police arrived, he was present at the house when her body was removed. And although he was not allowed to see the body himself, he had been told by officers that Dolly had died of natural causes, which is what they initially suspected. But later it was known that when speaking to an acquaintance, Gerald V. told them that the cause of death was strangulation, something he could not have known unless he had seen the body before police arrived. Although he was arrested, he was actually never charged with Dolly's murder because the police were never able to prove his involvement or secure enough evidence against him. He was released and the investigation was closed.
Because they're traipsing through, destroying evidence in both of these cases in such a damn hurry to cover up their own asses or people they knew.
Yep. Or people that are lining their pockets.
Correct. And or, in the alternative, taking this information so that they can use it for nefarious reasons later. To line their pockets.
Well, when you think about, how were police departments funded, right? Through politicians. So, and their agendas being in office.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of possibility here, but I can see exactly why the public generally thinks of these cases and thinks cover up. And I don't even know that they're connected in terms of the same killer.
No, I don't think so.
I think that they're connected, and I bet there's hundreds, if not thousands more, of simply when a high-profile person is engaging in buying sex and they want out of it and are maybe possibly threatened with being outed, they get rid of the problem.
But do you know what's interesting about both of these cases? And just in terms of these similarities, the public is not crucifying these women for their transactions.
No.
They're popular. They're the one they considered almost a heroine, right? Like she's become some type of an example and not a bad one.
And it's sad to them that it's not being solved, and they know
right.
why.
They do.
It's not being solved. Yep.
You just get the bad gut feeling like, yes, this person was doing something maybe she shouldn't have been doing morally, but she wasn't hurting anyone. And in fact, both of them were doing good things for society. The second gal was involved in a ton of charities and was doing so much good. The first gal, whether you like it or not, was legal because she was following through with all of the governmental requirements for her to engage in her occupation.
Correct. Yes. And they were just good and smart at what they did and had gained. I mean, it's what all of us hope to do, right? Just be successful in our careers and provide for ourselves or our families.
Yeah, it's why on this podcast, even though we both are probably considered relatively religious or spiritual or whatever, we don't ever condemn sex workers as victims in these cases, ever, because you have to be able to understand the history and the trauma behind it of how people end up engaged in those lines of work. Yeah. And remember, it wasn't always a line of work that was frowned upon. It was a normal part of society. Yep. And going back farther than that, it was one of the upper echelon type of things. If you were good at what you did, you lived a great life. Mm-hmm. And both of these women did that.
Correct. Both of them did it in an independent business way. They weren't being pimped. They might have been in the beginning, but then they ran their own body.
And again, to go along with that, they also weren't abusing other women in their practice.
Nope.
So we've seen cases where they become a madam. And they're not a good madam, right? They're beating their girls. They're taking money from them just like, a pimp would. Well, that's all they are, really. A madam is just a glorified, usually female pimp.
Yes.
And that wasn't the case of either of those women. Well respected, and people are sad their cases weren't solved.
Exactly. Now, at the time of Dolly's, there's significant speculation that several Dutch newspapers suggesting that this latest murder was part of a wider conspiracy. But with little evidence, police focused their investigation only on those associated with the actual murder victim. It has been suggested that one of Dolly's regular clients had murdered her during a sexual liaison. However, no names from her blue book were ever revealed. Now, there is Hans Godfrey van Wezel.
Van Wezel,
the former Dutch diplomat. He claimed that his father knew the identity of the killer. Now, Jan Godfrey van Wezel had been active in the Dutch resistance during World War II and later became chief commissioner of police in The Hague, where they were at that police station that was investigating. He allegedly kept a file on the case at home with the instruction to destroy it after his death.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So
how much of this is just post-mortem bragging, now that this is popularized?
Well,
Why come forward?
I think this was at the time. So Hans van Wezel, he was a former Dutch diplomat, claimed that his father knew the identity of the killer because his father, Jan van Wezel, had been active in the Dutch resistance and then was chief of police. So he's saying, my dad knew. My dad was the chief of police. He knew who the killer was, and it's a cover-up. My dad kept the case at home and told us to destroy it upon his death.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Governmental secrets, espionage,
over the course,
domestic terrorism.
So much all comes back to the pussy.
Always.
It's such a powerful force in the world.
I was waiting for what noun or verb you were going to use.
I think force is.
I think so.
Is an apt description.
It's always what? Money / greed, sex, power, and maybe even a little fear in the situation where one would do the killing just so one didn't. Get found out or something.
Found out. Yeah. Yes. I know. And all of it can come back to this very powerful force. Oh, right. Religion.
People killing that name a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Cult.
They do.
Religion. We'll put those in a separate one too.
They do. A lot of times there's a sexual connotation in those as well.
There really is. Or money. Yeah. Power.
Over the course of a 7-year investigation, journalist Casper Postma researched the murder and came to his own conclusion about who the killer was. He said that at one point in 1986, the police archive was transferred to a municipal.
See, an English word.
Say it slower. Municipal archive, which was made available to the public so Postma could view the files at this point in time. He said there really are hundreds of interrogations, and in the end, I figured out who the killer is. He believes that it was Gerald V. that was responsible for the death of Blonde Dolly. Because she worked without a pimp, she hired him as a bodyguard, after the murder of Blonde Marjorie, appointing and paying for Gerald with her own money, a man who had a substantial criminal record, as Postma described him. He said he's in love with her. He made up all kinds of stories about her, and he admitted to actually trying to put her on morphine, but had failed. So in his eyes, in Postma's eyes, this is an attempt at failed murder, a murder attempt. Okay. According to him, because remember, he got all of the records, so he read the interrogations. And according to Postma, the interrogation against Gerald V. was very clumsy and amateurish. He says they didn't question him vigorously enough during his interrogation like they did other suspects about her little blue book. He says there's little evidence that even existed, and the life of Blonde Dolly would later be used as the basis for Michael Du Bois' novel Murder on Black Martha, published in 1962. As well as in February 1987, a book called Blonde Dolly, which actually was a heavily fictionalized version of her story as well. So even though he spent 7 years, Mr. Postma spent 7 years going through the records that did exist and reading the interrogations, from what he found and could see, he believes that Gerald V. was the most likely suspect, and they just never pursued it anymore for fear that her little blue book would be exposed.
Okay, so that's not a bad theory. I think that he has a likely motive to kill her with this whole maybe unrequited love type of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, it could have been really easy just to make a scapegoat out of him as well.
Agreed. Which is what I wonder if all of the interrogation and the police reports really tried to make it look like that's what they were doing, in case they did either need a scapegoat or decided that, or if this kept being pushed to be solved, which it, of course, wasn't because of her profession.
And who better than her bodyguard would know her clientele?
Right.
He may not have direct access to her little blue book that somebody happened to pocket and walk off with, but he certainly knew who was coming and going from her house or could describe them as he's standing out there.
Yep.
And where was 100%. He that night? Where was he that weekend? He's supposed to be working, right?
Right. And she worked 5 nights a week. Okay. And so.
Oh, it was over the weekend, though.
Well, it was a Friday night or early Saturday morning.
Okay. And then they didn't find her till Monday.
Right.
Where were you, sir?
Right. So you work 5 nights a week too, then, essentially, right, Mr. Gerald?
I would think if that's what she was hiring him for, unless she was still doing business in her home privately and just utilizing him for when she was in public. But maybe. Just interesting.
So that are the Call Girls murders.
I thought they were
that
interesting.
Seems like a really big cover-up. I can buy into the conspiracy theory of a political or higher falutin societal cover-up.
No one's in a hurry to solve either of these. Let's just put it that way.
That's right. But I thought that it still is worth, these are the type of cases that really are worth covering, because people just write. I would hate for someone to write me off someday because they're like, well, she's just a social worker.
Oh, they do a true crime podcast. They were bound to be off.
Right. Great.
We're not going to look into this.
New fear unlocked, Megan. Thanks.
Because there's 10,000 suspects.
Yeah, right. Right.
So,
I don't know. That's something like that. Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should hire a bodyguard.
Perhaps. You know anybody?
No.
First of all, your husband could be the bodyguard.
He'd probably let him shoot both of us. I know. Just depending on the day. Yeah.
You're right. Depending on how annoyed he is with
either
one of us.
We're going to need somebody who actually likes us.
Oh, okay. Well, I would like to say brain bath Jason, but we all know that he's too scrattish.
We would prprotect him.
Yes.
And I think have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we're both scrappers.
Do you guys know the, I don't even know what it's called on Ice Age, but Scrat on Ice Age, the little squirrel. It's a squirrel,
Scrat.
isn't it?
Scrat, yeah.
That is our friend Jason, Brain Bath Jason.
When you're not calling him Beaker from the Muppets.
He is also Beaker. Yes.
The poor man.
Love him so much, but just to give everybody a general idea of who he is as a person, and
that's what you're missing by not subscribing to Charnell's Patreon for Grim Curious. Are you gonna bathe me?
I'm going to bathe you.
Do you ever get the sense that we have deja vu?
Sometimes. That is
I feel
crazy.
like I've asked you to bathe me before.
I think so, and it's almost like we had to go back and edit.
I'm weird because we almost outed someone.
We did. But we're not
without
going to.
naming this person's name.
Without naming this person's name, a beautiful listener with a beautiful name that we aren't going to say.
Even on accident.
Sent us this personal brain bath story. And so I am going to give it to us here. It says, 4th of July, shits and giggles.
This is what she's titled it?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
This past 4th of July, my family took a little trip to the lake. We spent the day kayaking, sailing, swimming, and of course, indulging in a little adult beverages and incredibly unhealthy snacks and meals.
That's
wonderful.
A day at the lake for me.
4th of July for most of America. I rarely allow myself the pleasure of high-calorie snacks, such as Debbie cakes and chips and dip, considering I can think about a cake and gain 10 pounds.
Same.
But this was a holiday and all, and we are being fairly active, I allowed myself to indulge. You go, person.
I have no judgment for her at all right now.
Or him.
Oh, yeah, it could be a him.
Yep. So
them.
That's right. Toward the late afternoon, we decided to put the kids down for a nap. My husband and I wanted to take the kayaks out, just the two of us, while my in-laws napped with the kids. I decided to trade in my modest mommy one-piece and throw on my naughty purple sparkling string bikini. Heck yeah.
Heck yeah.
Get it? We paddled down the river a little ways under a railroad bridge. Sounds so romantic. Where the river opens up to a beautiful lake. Picture it. Egrets flying over the water, cypress trees draped with Spanish moss. It's truly a perfect Louisiana afternoon. Suddenly, I feel a rumbling in my stomach.
No.
I start to sweat. Not from the Louisiana heat, but from the pounds of barbecue and beer I had consumed throughout the afternoon. My body was rejecting my poor choices. I look over at my husband, who is no doubt enjoying the view of me glistening in my sexy bikini.
Oh, yeah.
Because she's got the meat sweats.
She
is glistening.
But her bikini is sparkling.
It is. What follows is a short synopsis of our conversation. Me, I think I have to shit. Him, what? We're in the middle of the lake. Me, I fucking know we're in the lake.
Dude, they're in Louisiana. They're fucking alligators. How are you going to shit in the way? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just terrified for her right now.
I know. So many things going through my mind. She says, me, I fucking know we're in a lake. What the fuck do I do? Him looks around for approximately 30 seconds, then shrugs. Yes, that sounds like a husband, by the way.
Totally.
Me, I have an idea. Come hold the front of my kayak. Now, a question for you, dear friends.
No.
Have you ever tried to poop off the back of a kayak?
No, because you will fall.
Every time. Half drunk, while your husband, who you are trying to seduce only minutes earlier, laughs in your face. It's about as easy as it sounds. My husband is holding onto the front of my kayak, trying to hold it as steady as he can. I slowly scoop myself to the back of the kayak and hang my ass off.
I'm impressed so far.
Me too. I'm trying to pull my swimsuit to the side as my husband watches, trying to hold me steady through the laughter and tears. Now what happens next is simply the cherry on top of this tragic story of the death of my ego. I hear a horn in the distance. Remember when I said we had passed under the railroad? A fucking train comes barreling past, full of passengers.
Oh my God.
My loving husband let out a laugh so loud and so hard, he lost the grip of the kayak, flipping me into the murky, shitty water.
With alligators. I'm more afraid of those than your floating shit.
This was the end of our relationship. Kidding.
Oh
she
my
said.
God.
But it was nearly the end of his life. He's sworn to secrecy, and now y'all are as well. Not sure if I'll ever kayak again, but I do know one thing. I'll at least bring a bucket with me if I do.
Amen, sister. Wow.
Love it. Those are the kind of stories we are looking for, people. Email us, crimecuriouspodcast@yahoo.com.
It could have happened to either of us.
That could have been a personal story.
I go kayaking on my lakes and stuff all the time.
Absolutely. I indulge in barbecue and beer
Correct.
all the time. And my body too will reject it.
Agreed. Usually at an inopportune time.
Always.
I feel like I would have power kayaked to back to maybe where I came from.
Yes, or at least like got off to the side and just got in the weeds
Oh,
or
you
something.
can't do that in Louisiana. She'll
alligators.
die.
I
Like,
forgot.
again, we might run into snakes or a fucking snapper turtle that might take off part of a cheek.
It could take a toe.
It could totally take a toe and like a good portion of my juicy booty. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want a whole bunch taken off. Or what? Swans, they're fucking assholes.
Oh, they're dicks.
Yeah, they'll come over and
straight
attack
go
you.
for you.
They will. But
We just made Michigan sound so terrifying, by the way.
Right. And I was just thinking, never mind. We got you, Louisiana. Fuck you. We have swans. We have swans and snapping turtles.
That will bite your ass cheek
I tell
right
people all the time that my water's better than theirs because nothing will bite me in my water, and I stand corrected.
Yeah, that's true. It turns out we actually have several things that will, but they're not as much of a problem as you think. It's kind of like quicksand. Like when you were a kid, were you worried about quicksand? Because I know I was.
I was because of the never-ending story.
Yes.
I was traumatized.
Yes.
I will never be the same. Atreyu, save your fucking horse.
And it turns out quicksand's really not that big of a problem.
You're right. It's not a problem. So maybe alligators aren't that big of a problem
For sure.
in the
Because they probably know
southern
how to
swamps.
identify, avoid them.
So first of
where they
all,
like
the
to be.
alligator's floating along next to her, and he's like, "Oh great,
Another shitter.
Another person's gonna try to shit in my water.
That's
I'm
right.
not going over by them. They
For sure.
taste terrible.
Terrible. Yes, exactly. Like, oh, we've got Francis. God. We got another shitter. That's what the poor alligators say to themselves.
I do think that if they had the little neck thing that you could wear like the dog in Up, that is probably what they would translate.
I think so. All right. Well, thank you all so much for hanging in and listening to us. If you'd like to join Patreon and binge hundreds of episodes of bonus content, the link is in the show notes. Otherwise, you can go to patreon.com/crimecurious. We're there. And you could subscribe if you'd like to hear more too, so that you get a notification when we're on the YouTube now.
We're on the tube.
Yeah. Now that YouTube does YouTube podcasts, it's easier to upload our feed. So we're
sorry,
there.
there's still no video. It's just our glorious voices.
It is still just our voices, but you could find us there and listen to us on YouTube too and subscribe because that's what the kids do and say.
That's what we hear. So until next time, y'all.
Keep it curious.
Keep listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.